What if I told you that somewhere beneath the waves lies a city more advanced than anything we have today? A place where people lived 12,000 years ago with technology we're only just beginning to understand. A civilization so powerful that when it vanished, it left behind only whispers and legends. Before we begin, here's a quick favor. Before you get settled, please like this video and subscribe. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is. Just drop a comment and let me know. It's always wonderful to see people from all around the world joining us. Tonight, we're going to explore one of history's greatest mysteries. We'll dive deep into the ocean of time and discover evidence that might just change everything you thought you knew about human civilization. We'll visit underwater cities that actually exist, examine ancient technology that shouldn't be possible, and follow clues that span the entire globe. So get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, and let your mind drift as we journey back through the mists of time to uncover the truth about Atlantis. Part 1. The Mystery Begins, Chapter 1. The Man Who Started It All. Our story begins in ancient Greece, around 360 years before Christ was born. In the great city of Athens lived a man named Plato. Now, Plato wasn't just anyone. He was one of the most respected thinkers of his time, a student of Socrates and teacher to Aristotle. When Plato spoke, people listened. Plato was known for his wisdom, his careful thinking, and his deep respect for truth. He spent his life studying justice, reality, and the nature of existence. He founded the Academy in Athens, which some call the world's first university. This was a man who built his reputation on careful reasoning and philosophical honesty. So when Plato told the story of Atlantis, it carried weight. This wasn't some storyteller spinning tales for entertainment. This was a serious philosopher, sharing what he claimed was historical fact. Chapter 2. The Story That Changed Everything. In two of his writings, called Timaeus and Critias, Plato described an island civilization unlike anything the world had ever seen. He painted a picture of a place called Atlantis, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. According to Plato, Atlantis was enormous, larger than Libya and Asia combined. The city itself was built in perfect circles, with alternating rings of land and water. Gleaming temples rose toward the sky, made of gold, silver, and a mysterious metal called orichalcum that we can't identify today. The Atlanteans, Plato said, were master engineers. They built incredible harbors, vast networks of canals, and bridges that spanned great distances. They had hot and cold running water, something that wouldn't appear in Europe again for over 1,000 years. Their palaces were filled with gardens and fountains, and their technology seemed almost magical. But perhaps most remarkably, they had flying machines and weapons that could level mountains. They controlled vast territories and had influence across the ancient world. For thousands of years, they lived in prosperity and peace. Chapter 3. But here's the weird part. Now you might think this sounds like a fairy tale, like something from a fantasy novel, but here's what makes it so puzzling. Plato insisted this was all completely true. He wasn't writing fiction or creating a parable to teach a lesson. He specifically stated that this was historical fact. Remember, this is the same man who spent his entire career distinguishing between truth and illusion, between what's real and what's just appearance. Plato was obsessed with finding truth. So why would he suddenly start making up stories and claiming they were real? In his dialogue Timaeus, one of his characters says something very specific. This tale, though strange, is certainly true, having been attested by Solon, who was the wisest of the 7 sages. Solon was a real person, a famous Greek lawmaker who lived about 200 years before Plato. Plato claimed that Solon had traveled to Egypt and learned this story directly from Egyptian priests at the city of Sais. Chapter 4. The Egyptian Connection. According to Plato, these Egyptian priests possessed ancient records going back thousands and thousands of years. They told Solon about many civilizations that had risen and fallen, But Atlantis was the most remarkable of all. The priests described how Atlantis had existed 9,000 years before Solon's time. Since Solon lived around 600 BC, that would place Atlantis at approximately 9,600 BC, nearly 12,000 years ago from our perspective today. Think about that timeline for a moment. 12,000 years ago, according to mainstream history, humans were just barely beginning to farm. We were supposed to be living in small tribes, hunting and gathering, maybe just starting to settle down in tiny villages. But these Egyptian priests described a vast, sophisticated civilization with advanced technology, global trade networks, and engineering capabilities that rival our own today. A civilization that existed for thousands of years before suddenly vanishing in a single day and night. Chapter 5. The Great Catastrophe. The priests told Solon that Atlantis didn't simply fade away gradually. Instead, it was destroyed in a massive catastrophe that happened incredibly quickly. In Plato's words, in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared in the depths of the sea. Earthquakes shook the earth, the sea swallowed the land, and an entire civilization vanished beneath the waves. The waters became muddy and unnavigable, and the location of Atlantis was lost forever. But the effects weren't limited to Atlantis itself. The priests described how this catastrophe affected the entire world, causing floods, climate changes, and the collapse of other civilizations. It was, in their words, a global reset that sent humanity back to a more primitive state. Chapter 6. Why People Think It's Fake. Now, for over 2,000 years, most scholars have dismissed Atlantis as pure fiction. They argue that Plato made it up as a cautionary tale about the dangers of pride and corruption. They point out that no other ancient source mentions Atlantis, and no archaeological evidence has been definitively found. Some say Plato created Atlantis to show what happens when a civilization becomes too powerful and loses its moral compass. The story ends, after all, with the Atlanteans becoming greedy and warlike, leading to their divine punishment and destruction. Academic historians often smile politely when Atlantis is mentioned, then change the subject. They've built their careers on a timeline of human development that has no room for an advanced civilization 12,000 years ago. To them, it's simply impossible. They argue that if such a massive, advanced civilization had existed, we would have found clear evidence by now. Where are the ruins? Where are the artifacts? Where are the written records from other cultures? Chapter 7. But what if they're wrong? But here's the question that keeps nagging at researchers, explorers, and curious minds around the world. What if the scholars are wrong? What if they've been so focused on proving Atlantis is fiction that they've missed the evidence that it might be real? After all, we've only explored about 20% of our ocean floors. There are vast areas of the deep sea that remain completely unmapped and unexplored. If a civilization was destroyed by rising sea levels or geological catastrophe 12,000 years ago, wouldn't it now be buried under miles of sediment or hidden in the deepest parts of the ocean? And consider this. In just the last few decades, we've discovered numerous lost civilizations that scholars once insisted were mythical. Troy was considered pure legend until Heinrich Schliemann found it. The Minoan civilization was unknown until Arthur Evans uncovered it. Countless cities, kingdoms, and cultures have been rediscovered after being lost for centuries or millennia. Moreover, we're learning that our ancestors were far more sophisticated than we once believed. Recent discoveries have pushed back the timeline of human achievement again and again. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, built around 11,000 years ago, features massive stone circles and intricate carvings that require advanced planning and social organization. This is supposedly from the time when humans were just learning to farm, yet it demonstrates engineering and artistic capabilities that rival anything from later civilizations. Chapter 8. The Persistence of the Legend. Perhaps most intriguingly, variations of the Atlantis story appear in cultures around the world, even in places that supposedly had no contact with ancient Greece. From the Americas to Asia, from Africa to the Pacific Islands, we find legends of great civilizations that were destroyed by floods, earthquakes, or other catastrophes. The ancient Egyptians had their own stories of lost kingdoms. Hindu texts describe advanced civilizations like Dwarka that sank beneath the sea. Native American traditions speak of great floods that destroyed earlier worlds. Mayan and Aztec legends tell of cycles of creation and destruction. Could all of these be distant memories of the same event? Could they be different cultural interpretations of a real global catastrophe that destroyed an advanced civilization? As we drift deeper into this mystery, we'll explore these questions and more. We'll examine the surprising physical evidence that's been discovered in recent decades, evidence that even the most skeptical scholars are finding hard to explain away. Part 2. Shocking Evidence Around the World. Chapter 9. Cities Beneath the Waves. Now you might think that if Atlantis really existed, we would have found some trace of it by now. But here's something remarkable. We actually have found numerous ancient cities beneath the waters of our world. Cities that were once thriving centers of civilization, now resting silently on the ocean floor. These discoveries are changing how we think about our ancient past. They're proving that civilizations can indeed vanish beneath the waves, leaving behind only stone witnesses to their former glory. Let me take you on a journey to 3 of the most extraordinary underwater cities ever discovered. Chapter 10. The Yonaguni Monument, Japan's underwater mystery. Off the southern coast of Japan, near the small island of Yonaguni, lies one of the most puzzling underwater structures on Earth. Discovered in 1987 by a local diving instructor, the Yonaguni Monument rises from the ocean floor like something from a dream. Imagine diving down through crystal-clear water and suddenly coming face to face with massive stone terraces, perfectly straight walls, and what appears to be a giant stepped pyramid. The structure is enormous, nearly 500 feet long, 130 feet wide, and 90 feet high. Its surfaces are covered with what look like roads, stairs, and even ceremonial platforms. The most striking feature is a formation that researchers call the turtle, a massive stone structure that appears to have been carved to resemble a giant turtle or tortoise. There are also formations that look remarkably like faces, complete with eyes and mouths carved from solid rock. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The structure sits at a depth that would have placed it above sea level during the last ice age, roughly 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. This means that if it's man-made, it was built around the same time Plato claimed Atlantis existed. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura has spent decades studying the monument. He believes the evidence strongly suggests human construction. The angles are too precise, the surface is too flat, and the overall design too complex to be natural rock formation. He's identified what appear to be tool marks, drainage channels, and even stone quarries nearby. But other scientists argue it could be natural, shaped by underwater currents and geological forces over thousands of years. The debate continues, but one thing is certain. Whether natural or artificial, the Yonaguni Monument proves that impressive structures can survive for millennia beneath the sea. Chapter 11. Dwarka, the Golden City of Krishna. From the waters off Japan, let's travel to the coast of western India, where archaeologists have made one of the most significant underwater discoveries of modern times. Here, beneath the Arabian Sea, lies the ancient city of Dwarka. According to Hindu scripture, particularly the Mahabharata and the Puranas, Dwarka was the magnificent capital city of Lord Krishna. The texts describe it as a golden city with palaces, gardens, and harbors that could accommodate thousands of ships. It was said to be so beautiful that even the gods admired its splendor. For centuries, scholars treated these descriptions as pure mythology. But in the 1980s, marine archaeologist Dr. S.R. Rao made a discovery that changed everything. Using side-scan sonar and underwater excavation techniques, his team began uncovering the remains of an ancient city exactly where the scriptures said it would be. What they found was extraordinary. Stone walls, pillars, and structures dating back over 3,000 years. harbor installations that could have supported a major maritime civilization, pottery, sculptures, and artifacts that matched the descriptions in ancient texts. The city showed evidence of sophisticated urban planning, with organized streets and drainage systems. But perhaps most remarkably, the ancient texts had described how Dwarka was eventually swallowed by the sea. The Mahabharata specifically states that after Krishna's departure from Earth, the ocean rose and engulfed the city. And that's exactly what the archaeological evidence shows, a thriving city that was suddenly abandoned and submerged. The discovery of underwater Dwarka proved something profound. Ancient texts that scholars had dismissed as pure legend often contained accurate historical information. If the Hindu scriptures correctly preserved the location and fate of Dwarka for thousands of years, what other mythical cities might actually be real? Chapter 12. Heracleion, Egypt's Lost Wonder. Our final underwater city brings us to the Mediterranean coast of Egypt, where one of the most spectacular archaeological discoveries of the 21st century was made. For over 1,000 years, the ancient city of Heracleion was completely lost to history. Ancient Greek and Egyptian texts spoke of a great port city near the mouth of the Nile, a place where pharaohs were crowned, and where the famous Helen of Troy was said to have stayed with her lover Paris. But by the 8th century AD, all trace of the city had vanished. Scholars began to wonder if it had ever existed at all. Then, in 2000, French archaeologist Frank Gaudiot was searching for Napoleon's lost fleet when his instruments detected something unexpected on the seafloor. What he found was the lost city of Heracleion, preserved in remarkable condition beneath 45 feet of water and sediment. The city was massive, covering an area of about 25 square miles. Its buildings, temples, and harbors had been perfectly preserved by the Mediterranean's silt and sand. Colossal statues of pharaohs and gods still stood where they had been placed over 2,000 years ago. Ships rested in ancient harbors, their cargo still aboard. The centerpiece of the discovery was the great temple of Amun-Gareb, where pharaohs came to receive the divine blessing of kingship. The temple was filled with gold jewelry, coins, and religious artifacts. Massive stone blocks, some weighing over 50 tons, had been precisely fitted together without mortar. What destroyed Heracleion? The evidence suggests it was a combination of earthquakes, rising sea levels, and soil liquefaction that caused the entire city to sink gradually into the sea. The process may have taken several centuries, giving people time to evacuate, but eventually the Mediterranean claimed this jewel of the ancient world. Chapter 13. The pattern emerges. Now, as you listen to these stories of lost cities, a pattern begins to emerge. Yonaguni, potentially 12,000 years old, sunk beneath the Pacific. Dwarka, over 3,000 years old, claimed by the Arabian Sea. Heracleion, lost for 1,200 years, hidden beneath the Mediterranean. If these cities sank, could Atlantis have too? Each of these discoveries teaches us something important. First, that advanced civilizations can indeed be swallowed by the sea and lost for millennia. Second, that ancient texts often contain more historical truth than modern scholars initially believe. And third, that we're only just beginning to explore the archaeological treasures hidden beneath our oceans. Chapter 14. Ancient technology that shouldn't exist. But lost cities aren't the only evidence that our ancestors might have been more advanced than we thought. Around the world, archaeologists have discovered artifacts and structures that seem to demonstrate technological capabilities far beyond what we believed ancient people possessed. These discoveries challenge our basic assumptions about the progression of human civilization. They suggest that perhaps knowledge and technology don't always advance in a straight line. Perhaps sometimes they're lost and must be rediscovered. Chapter 15. The Antikythera Mechanism, Ancient Computer. In 1901, sponge divers working off the Greek island of Antikythera discovered the wreck of an ancient Roman ship. Among the artifacts they brought to the surface was a corroded lump of bronze and wood that would revolutionize our understanding of ancient technology. For decades, this object sat in a museum, largely ignored. It wasn't until the 1950s that researchers began to realize what they were looking at. Hidden within the corrosion was an incredibly complex mechanical device with dozens of precisely crafted bronze gears. As scientists carefully studied and reconstructed the mechanism, they discovered something astonishing. This device, built around 100 BC, was essentially an ancient computer. It could predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets with remarkable accuracy. It could calculate eclipses years in advance and track the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. The level of mechanical sophistication was extraordinary. The gear ratios were calculated to astronomical precision, and the craftsmanship rivaled that of 18th-century clockmakers. One researcher called it more complex than any known device for at least 1,000 years afterwards. But here's what's truly puzzling. This wasn't some unique prototype. The quality of construction and the wear patterns suggest that similar devices were being manufactured regularly. This was mature technology, which means the knowledge to create such devices had been developing for generations. Who were the ancient engineers who possessed this knowledge? And if they could build mechanical computers 2,000 years ago, what other technologies might they have mastered? Chapter 16. Baalbek. The Impossible Stones. High in the mountains of Lebanon stands one of the most mysterious archaeological sites in the world. The ancient Roman temple complex at Baalbek contains some of the largest stone blocks ever used in construction, blocks so massive that modern engineers struggle to understand how they were moved and placed. The foundation of the Temple of Jupiter contains stones that weigh between 300 and 800 tons each. To put that in perspective, the largest stones at Stonehenge weigh about 50 tons. These Lebanese blocks are more than 10 times heavier, but even more mysterious is a stone block that was never moved from the ancient quarry. Known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, this single piece of limestone weighs an estimated 1,000 tons. Nearby lies an even larger block, weighing approximately 1,750 tons, making it one of the largest carved stone blocks in the world. How did ancient engineers plan to move these enormous stones? Modern cranes can lift about 20,000 tons, but they require massive steel frameworks and advanced engineering. The largest mobile crane in the world can lift about 3,000 tons under ideal conditions. Yet somehow, ancient builders not only planned to move these stones, but actually did move many of them up a mountainside and placed them with millimeter precision in their temple foundations. The joints between the blocks are so tight that you can't slip a piece of paper between them. Traditional archaeology suggests that the Romans built Baalbek using massive workforces, ramps, and wooden rollers. But engineering analyses suggest that moving 800-ton blocks with ancient technology would have required coordinated teams of thousands of workers and engineering knowledge that we don't think they possessed. Some researchers have proposed that the foundation blocks might be much older than the Roman temples built on top of them, possibly dating back to a time when more advanced construction techniques were available. Chapter 17. Puma Punku. Precision in stone. High in the Bolivian Andes, at an altitude of over 12,000 feet, lies one of the most precisely crafted stone sites on Earth. Puma Punku is part of the larger Tiwanaku complex, and it challenges everything we think we know about ancient stoneworking capabilities. The blocks at Puma Punku aren't just large, they're incredibly precise. The surfaces are flat to within a few thousandths of an inch, smoother than most modern construction. The corners are perfectly square, and the angles are exact to degrees that would challenge modern stone cutters using power tools. Some blocks have complex interlocking shapes, with grooves, channels, and protrusions that fit together like pieces of a giant three-dimensional puzzle. The precision is so exact that the joints require no mortar. The blocks simply lock together through perfect engineering. The stone itself is andesite and red sandstone, both extremely hard materials that are difficult to work even with modern diamond-tipped tools. Yet somehow, ancient craftsmen shaped these blocks into complex forms that look almost machine-made. Carbon dating suggests that Puma Punku was built around 600 AD, but some researchers argue that the site might be much older. The level of precision suggests access to measuring tools, cutting implements, and engineering knowledge that supposedly didn't exist in ancient South America. Local legends speak of the site being built by the gods in a single night, using sounds that could move stones through the air. While we can't take such stories literally, they do suggest that even ancient people found the construction methods mysterious and impressive. Chapter 18. This technology shouldn't exist, but it does. As you listen to these examples, you might notice a common thread. In each case, we're looking at ancient achievements that seem to exceed the technological capabilities we've attributed to those time periods. The Antikythera mechanism demonstrates mechanical precision and astronomical knowledge that we didn't think existed in ancient Greece. The Baalbek stones require engineering and lifting capabilities that challenge our understanding of ancient construction methods. Puma Punku shows stoneworking precision that rivals modern machine tools. These aren't isolated examples. Around the world, archaeologists continue to discover evidence of ancient technological sophistication that doesn't fit our textbook timelines of human progress. Perhaps most intriguingly, these examples come from different continents and different time periods, yet they share common characteristics: precision, massive scale, and engineering capabilities that seem almost impossibly advanced for their supposed age. Chapter 19. The Great Flood, a global memory. But there's another pattern that emerges when we look at ancient cultures around the world, a pattern that might connect directly to the Atlantis story. Almost every culture on Earth has preserved stories of a great flood that destroyed an earlier world. You probably know the story of Noah's Ark from the Bible, but that's just one version of a much more widespread tradition. The ancient Mesopotamians told the story of Gilgamesh, who survived a flood sent by the gods to destroy humanity. Hindu scriptures describe how Vishnu saved humanity from a world-destroying deluge. Chinese mythology speaks of great floods that reshaped the earth. Native American tribes across North and South America have flood stories. Australian Aboriginal traditions describe a time when the waters rose and changed the landscape forever. Pacific Island cultures remember floods that swallowed entire islands. African traditions speak of waters that covered the mountains. These stories appear in cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other, yet the details are remarkably similar. A great flood destroys most of humanity. A few people survive by building boats or fleeing to high places. After the waters recede, the survivors must rebuild civilization from scratch. For a long time, scholars dismissed these as purely mythological, symbolic stories about rebirth and renewal. But what if they're not just myths? What if they're cultural memories of real events? Chapter 20. What if they're all remembering the same event? Modern geology tells us that between 15,000 and 11,000 years ago, the Earth experienced dramatic climate changes as the last ice age came to an end. Massive ice sheets that covered much of North America and northern Europe began to melt rapidly, releasing enormous volumes of water into the oceans. Sea levels rose by about 400 feet during this period, enough to flood vast areas of coastal land where ancient people might have lived. But the process wasn't gradual and steady. Recent research suggests there were periods of rapid, catastrophic flooding when ice dams broke and released massive lakes worth of water in short periods. One event, called the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis, suggests that around 12,900 years ago, a comet or asteroid impact caused rapid climate change, massive flooding, and the extinction of many large animal species. The timing is remarkably close to Plato's date for the destruction of Atlantis. Other geological evidence points to a massive underwater landslide called the Storegga Slide, which occurred about 8,000 years ago off the coast of Norway. This event created a tsunami that would have devastated coastal communities across northern Europe and could have inspired flood legends in that region. The point is this: real catastrophic flooding has occurred repeatedly throughout human history. These weren't gentle, gradual changes. They were sudden, world-altering events that would have seemed like the end of the world to anyone who experienced them. Chapter 21. The End of the Ice Age, A World Transformed. Let your mind drift back 12,000 years to the end of the last ice age. The world was a very different place then. Much of what is now ocean floor was dry land, connected by land bridges that allowed people and animals to migrate between continents. The English Channel didn't exist. Britain was connected to Europe by a vast plain called Doggerland. The Bering Land Bridge connected Asia to North America. The Persian Gulf was a river valley. The Red Sea was much narrower. Vast areas of what are now continental shelves were prime real estate for human settlement. As the ice melted and sea levels rose, all of this land was gradually submerged. Entire ecosystems disappeared beneath the waves. Any cities, settlements, or civilizations that had developed in these areas would have been lost forever, buried under hundreds of feet of water and sediment. This process happened over several thousand years, but within that time frame, there were periods of rapid change. When ice dams failed or massive ice sheets collapsed, the flooding could have been sudden and catastrophic. Coastal communities might have had only days or weeks to flee to higher ground. If an advanced civilization like Atlantis had existed during this period, particularly if it was located in low-lying coastal areas or islands, it could have been completely destroyed by the rising seas. The survivors would have been scattered, their knowledge fragmented, their great cities lost beneath waters that would never recede. Part 3. Where could Atlantis really be? Chapter 23. Location Theory, Number 1. The Mediterranean Sea, Santorini, and the Minoan Mystery. Our first journey takes us to the sparkling blue waters of the Mediterranean, to a group of islands that were once the site of one of the most powerful volcanic explosions in human history. Today, the Greek island of Santorini is famous for its stunning sunsets, whitewashed buildings, and dramatic cliffs. But this picturesque scene hides a violent past that may hold the key to the Atlantis mystery. Around 1600 BC, what was then a single large island was home to a sophisticated civilization. Archaeological evidence shows bustling cities with multi-story buildings, advanced plumbing systems, and beautiful frescoes decorating palace walls. The people who lived here were skilled sailors, traders, and artisans who had contact with cultures across the Mediterranean. But then, in what may have been a matter of days or even hours, everything changed. Chapter 24. The explosion that shook the ancient world. The volcanic eruption that destroyed ancient Santorini was one of the most powerful in recorded history. Imagine an explosion so massive that it could be heard over 1,000 miles away. The blast ejected an estimated 24 cubic miles of rock, ash, and pumice into the atmosphere, creating a column of debris that reached into the stratosphere. The explosion was so violent that it caused the center of the island to collapse, creating the dramatic caldera that tourists admire today. Where once there had been a thriving island civilization, there was now a massive crater filled with seawater. The effects weren't limited to Santorini itself. The explosion generated enormous tsunamis that raced across the Mediterranean at hundreds of miles per hour. These waves, some potentially over 100 feet high, would have devastated coastal cities throughout the region. Ash from the eruption has been found in ice cores from Greenland and in sediment layers across the eastern Mediterranean. The amount of ash ejected into the atmosphere would have caused dramatic climate effects, possibly leading to failed harvests and social upheaval across a wide area. Chapter 25. The Minoan Connection. But here's where the story becomes truly intriguing. At the time of the Santorini eruption, the Mediterranean was dominated by a sophisticated civilization that archaeologists call the Minoans, based on their capital at Knossos on the island of Crete. The Minoans were remarkable for their time. They built elaborate palaces with running water, flush toilets, and sophisticated drainage systems. Their artwork shows a love of nature, beauty, and celebration. They appeared to be a peaceful people. Their cities had no walls, and their art showed little evidence of warfare. Most remarkably, Minoan society seems to have been relatively egalitarian, possibly even matriarchal. Women held important positions in religious ceremonies and appear to have had significant social power. This was unusual for ancient civilizations and matches some aspects of Plato's description of Atlantean society. The Minoans were also master mariners. They controlled trade routes throughout the Mediterranean and established colonies on islands and coastlines from Sicily to the coast of Asia Minor. Their ships carried precious goods, gold, silver, ivory, and exotic spices, across the ancient world. But then, around the same time as the Santorini eruption, Minoan civilization began to decline rapidly. Within a few generations, their palaces were abandoned, their trade networks collapsed, and their distinctive culture disappeared from history. Chapter 26. Could this be Atlantis? The parallels to Plato's Atlantis story are striking. Both were island civilizations with advanced technology for their time. Both were powerful maritime cultures that controlled extensive territories. Both were described as being destroyed suddenly by natural catastrophe. The timeline also works. While Plato placed Atlantis much earlier, around 9600 BC, some researchers suggest that the Egyptian priests who told the story to Solon might have miscalculated the dates, or that the numbers were mistranslated over the centuries. The Santorini theory suggests that Atlantis wasn't a single island, but rather the entire Minoan civilization, with Santorini serving as one of its most important centers. When the volcano exploded, it didn't just destroy one city, it triggered the collapse of an entire Mediterranean empire. But there are problems with this theory too. The Minoans weren't located beyond the Pillars of Hercules as Plato described. Their civilization, while advanced, doesn't match all of Plato's descriptions of Atlantean technology and power, and most importantly, we know quite a lot about the Minoans from archaeological evidence. They don't seem to have simply vanished without a trace. Still, as you drift through this possibility, consider how a catastrophic volcanic explosion might have been remembered and retold over centuries, growing in the telling until it became the legend that eventually reached Plato's ears. Chapter 27. Location. Theory number 2. The Atlantic Ocean, hidden beneath the waves. Our second journey takes us far from the familiar Mediterranean, out into the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, to places where the water is 2 miles deep, and the seafloor holds secrets that have never seen sunlight. Plato was very specific about Atlantis being located in the Atlantic, beyond the Pillars of Hercules. He described it as being larger than Libya and Asia combined, and as controlling territories on both sides of the ocean. If we take his account literally, we should be looking not in the Mediterranean, but in the deep Atlantic itself. And remarkably, modern oceanography has revealed features of the Atlantic floor that make this possibility more intriguing than early skeptics ever imagined. Chapter 28. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge, an underwater mountain range. Running down the center of the Atlantic Ocean, from the Arctic to the Antarctic, is one of the most impressive geological features on Earth. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is an underwater mountain range that stretches for over 10,000 miles, making it longer than the Rocky Mountains, the Andes, and the Himalayas combined. This ridge represents the place where the European and North American continental plates are slowly pulling apart, creating new oceanic crust as magma rises from deep within the Earth. But what's fascinating is that parts of this ridge rise to within a few hundred feet of the ocean surface, and in some places they break through to form islands. Iceland sits on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, as do the Azores, a group of Portuguese islands about 900 miles west of Portugal. These islands are essentially the peaks of underwater mountains, the visible tips of a vast submerged landscape. But here's the intriguing question. If sea levels were lower in the past, or if portions of the ridge were higher than they are today, could there have been more land above water? Could there have been islands, or even a substantial landmass where now there is only deep ocean? Chapter 29. The Azores, Mountain Peaks of a Lost Land? The Azores consist of 9 volcanic islands scattered across several hundred miles of ocean. Today, they're home to about 250,000 people and are known for their dramatic landscapes, hot springs, and unique culture that blends Portuguese, Flemish, and other European influences. But geological evidence suggests that these islands are just the highest points of a much larger volcanic plateau. Bathymetric maps, detailed charts of the ocean floor, show that the Azores sit on a raised platform that extends far beyond the visible islands. Some researchers have suggested that during the last ice age, when global sea levels were 300 to 400 feet lower, much more of this platform would have been above water. What are now separate islands might have been connected as part of a larger landmass. Local Azorean folklore contains intriguing hints about lost lands. Stories speak of islands that disappeared beneath the waves, and of ancient settlements that can sometimes be glimpsed beneath the water on calm days. While such stories are common in maritime cultures, they take on new significance when considered alongside the geological evidence. Portuguese historians have also noted references in medieval documents to islands in the Atlantic that were subsequently lost or could no longer be found. Some of these references predate the official discovery of the Azores by Portuguese navigators, suggesting that knowledge of Atlantic islands may be much older than official history records. Chapter 30. Mapping the Ocean Floor. What lies hidden? Modern technology has allowed us to create detailed maps of the Atlantic floor, revealing a landscape that's as varied and dramatic as any on land. There are underwater canyons deeper than the Grand Canyon, mountain ranges that dwarf the Alps, and vast plains that stretch for hundreds of miles. But what's particularly intriguing are the formations that don't quite fit expected geological patterns. Sonar surveys have identified structures that appear too regular, too geometric to be entirely natural. Rectangular formations, straight lines, and what appear to be terraced features have been detected in various locations across the Atlantic floor. Of course, the ocean is a dynamic environment. 2 miles of water create enormous pressure, and sediment accumulates steadily over thousands of years. Even if substantial ruins existed on the Atlantic floor, they would likely be buried under hundreds of feet of sediment by now, making them nearly impossible to detect with current technology. But consider this: we've explored less than 5% of our ocean floors in any detail. The deep Atlantic remains largely unmapped and unexplored. If Atlantis lies beneath the waves of the Atlantic, we might simply not have the technology yet to find it. Chapter 31. What's hiding under 2 miles of water? As you imagine the vast darkness of the deep Atlantic, consider what challenges face any search for underwater ruins. The pressure at 2 miles depth is crushing, over 300 times greater than at sea level. The water is completely dark, near freezing, and filled with sediment that reduces visibility to just a few feet. Any exploration requires specialized submarines or remotely operated vehicles that cost millions of dollars to build and operate. Even then, they can only examine small areas at a time, moving slowly across the seafloor like deep-sea detectives with flashlights. Yet despite these challenges, deep-sea exploration continues to yield surprises. In recent years, researchers have discovered underwater rivers, vast fields of volcanic vents supporting unique ecosystems, and geological formations that challenge our understanding of ocean floor dynamics. If Atlantis does lie beneath the Atlantic, it waits in one of the most inaccessible environments on Earth, protected by darkness, pressure, and time itself. Chapter 32. Location Theory. G3. Antarctica. The Frozen Continent's Secret. Past. Our third journey takes us to the bottom of the world, to the vast white expanse of Antarctica. This might seem like an unlikely place to search for a lost civilization, but recent discoveries about Antarctica's past have opened up possibilities that few researchers had previously considered. Today, Antarctica is the coldest, driest, and most inhospitable continent on Earth. It's covered by an ice sheet that averages over a mile thick and contains about 70% of the world's fresh water. The idea that this frozen wasteland could once have supported an advanced civilization seems absurd. But Antarctica wasn't always frozen, and it wasn't always located at the South Pole. Chapter 33. Before the Ice, a Different World. The theory of continental drift tells us that the continents aren't fixed in place. They move slowly across the Earth's surface over millions of years, carried by the movement of tectonic plates. Antarctica has been wandering across the southern hemisphere for hundreds of millions of years, and its climate has changed dramatically as it moved. But more intriguingly, recent research suggests that Antarctica's ice sheet is much younger than previously thought. While the continent has been cold for millions of years, the massive ice sheet that covers it today may have formed much more recently, possibly within the last few million years, and with periods of partial melting as recently as a few 100,000 years ago. This means that during certain periods in the relatively recent past, parts of Antarctica might have been ice-free, with a climate that could have supported plant life and possibly even human habitation. But there's an even more intriguing possibility. Some researchers have suggested that if a major shift in Earth's crust occurred, an event called crustal displacement, Antarctica might have been located in a much warmer latitude within human history, only moving to its current polar position relatively recently. Chapter 34. The Peary Race Map. Ancient Knowledge of Ice-Free Antarctica. In 1929, scholars examining the archives of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul made a remarkable discovery. They found a world map drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral named Peary Rice, a map that showed geographical knowledge that shouldn't have been available to 16th-century cartographers. The map accurately depicts the coastlines of South America and Africa with remarkable precision for its time. But most remarkably, it shows the northern coast of Antarctica, depicted as ice-free land with rivers, mountains, and what appear to be harbors. This is puzzling because Antarctica wasn't officially discovered by European explorers until 1820, over 300 years after Peary Rice drew his map. And the coastline shown on the map matches the actual shape of the land beneath Antarctica's ice sheet, information that wasn't available until Antarctic ice-penetrating surveys were conducted in the 1950s. Peary Rice noted on his map that he had consulted over 20 earlier maps and sources, some dating back to ancient times. He specifically mentioned using maps from the time of Alexander the Great and charts that had been preserved in the Library of Alexandria. For years, geologists thought the Riche structure was the result of a meteorite impact. The circular shape and raised rim seemed consistent with an ancient crater, but detailed studies revealed something different. This formation appears to be the result of geological uplift and erosion, creating a natural bullseye in the desert. But some researchers have proposed a radical alternative interpretation. What if the Riche structure isn't entirely natural? What if it's the remains of a circular city built according to the precise description that Plato provided for Atlantis? Chapter 38. A perfect match to Plato's description. When you compare Plato's description of Atlantis to the Riche structure, the similarities are remarkable. Plato described Atlantis as a series of concentric circles, alternating rings of land and water, with the royal palace at the center. The Riche structure consists of several concentric circular ridges separated by circular valleys. The outer ring is about 30 miles in diameter, which would make it roughly the size that Plato described for the outer boundary of Atlantis. Plato mentioned that Atlantis was located on a plain surrounded by mountains on three sides, with the ocean to the south. The Riche structure sits on a relatively flat area of the Sahara, with the Atlas Mountains to the north and west, and what would have been the ancient coastline of Africa to the south. Most remarkably, Plato described specific details about the construction of Atlantis that seemed to match geological features of the Riche structure. He mentioned that the Atlanteans quarried both black and red stone from their island. The Riche structure contains both black volcanic rock and red sandstone. He described how the Atlanteans dug canals and harbors to connect their city to the sea. Satellite imagery of the Riche structure shows what appear to be ancient water channels leading away from the formation toward what would have been the coast of ancient Africa. Chapter 39. Evidence of Ancient Water. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the Richat structure theory is the presence of salt deposits and marine fossils throughout the formation. This suggests that the area was once covered by water, possibly by a large inland sea or lake connected to the ocean. The Sahara Desert wasn't always the arid wasteland we see today. Climate research shows that as recently as 6,000 years ago, much of North Africa was green and well-watered, with rivers, lakes, and forests, where now there is only sand. But the transformation to desert conditions happened relatively recently in geological terms, and it happened quickly. Within just a few centuries, the climate changed dramatically, turning lush grasslands into the barren landscape we see today. If the Richat structure was the site of a major city during the Green Sahara period, it would have had access to abundant water and fertile land. The circular ridges could have channeled water for irrigation and navigation, creating the alternating rings of land and water that Plato described. As the climate changed and the region became increasingly arid, any civilization located there would have faced a crisis. Their water sources would have dried up, their agriculture would have failed, and they would have been forced to abandon their city to the encroaching desert. Chapter 40. Dating the Destruction. Interestingly, the timing of the Sahara's transformation from green land to desert roughly coincides with the rise of ancient Egyptian civilization around 3100 BC. Some researchers have suggested that refugees from the drying Sahara might have migrated to the Nile Valley, bringing with them advanced knowledge that helped establish Egyptian civilization. This would place the destruction of a Saharan Atlantis much more recently than Plato suggested, around 5,000 years ago rather than 12,000. But it's possible that the Egyptian priests who preserved the story might have measured time differently, or that the numbers became exaggerated in the retelling over many generations. The Eye of the Sahara theory also addresses one of the main criticisms of the Atlantis story, the claim that such a large civilization would have left more archaeological evidence. If Atlantis was located in what is now the Sahara, any ruins would have been buried under sand dunes and eroded by thousands of years of desert winds. Archaeological exploration of the Sahara is extremely difficult due to the harsh climate and the fact that potential sites are buried under shifting sands. However, recent satellite surveys have revealed the outlines of ancient rivers, roads, and settlements throughout the desert, suggesting that much of North Africa's ancient history remains hidden beneath the sand. Chapter 41. The Most Convincing Evidence. Yet, as you consider the Richat structure theory, notice how it addresses many of the puzzles surrounding Atlantis. The location matches Plato's geographical clues when adjusted for ancient African coastlines. The circular structure perfectly matches his architectural description. The geological evidence supports the presence of ancient water sources, and the timeline of the Sahara's desertification provides a plausible mechanism for the civilization's destruction and abandonment. The theory also explains why Atlantis has never been found despite centuries of searching. It's been hidden in plain sight, disguised as a natural geological formation in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Recent expeditions to the Richat structure have found scattered artifacts that suggest human presence in the ancient past, though nothing yet that definitively proves the existence of a major civilization. The harsh desert environment makes detailed archaeological work extremely challenging, and most of the area remains unexplored. But satellite imagery continues to reveal intriguing features: straight lines that might be ancient roads, rectangular shapes that could be building foundations, and complex patterns that seem too regular to be entirely natural. Part 4. The Technology Question. Chapter 43. The Visionary's Account. Edgar Cayce and Crystal Power. Our exploration of Atlantean technology begins with one of the most controversial sources in the entire Atlantis literature, the psychic readings of Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet. From 1901 until his death in 1945, Cayce claimed to enter trance states where he could access what he called the Akashic Records, a kind of cosmic library containing all knowledge of past, present, and future events. During these trances, Casey gave thousands of readings on topics ranging from medical diagnosis to ancient history. Many of Casey's medical readings proved remarkably accurate, leading to successful treatments for conditions that baffled conventional doctors. But it was his readings about Atlantis that captured the public imagination and sparked decades of controversy. According to Casey's visions, Atlantis existed for thousands of years as a highly advanced civilization that mastered what he called crystal technology. He described enormous crystals that served as sources of unlimited energy, capable of powering entire cities and providing heat, light, and motive force for all manner of devices. Now, it's important to approach Casey's claims with appropriate skepticism. There's no scientific way to verify psychic visions, and many of his specific predictions about Atlantis, such as the rising of parts of the lost continent in the 1960s, never came to pass. But what makes Casey's accounts intriguing is not their literal accuracy, but rather how they align with certain principles of physics that weren't well understood during his lifetime. His descriptions of crystal technology, energy resonance, and harmonic frequencies bear striking similarities to phenomena that modern science has since discovered and studied. Chapter 44. The Great Crystal, Source of Unlimited Power. In Casey's most detailed reading about Atlantean technology, given in 1933, he described what the Atlanteans called the Great Crystal, or Firestone. This massive crystal was housed in a domed building and served as the primary source of energy for the entire Atlantean civilization. According to the reading, the crystal could focus and amplify natural Earth energies, creating a renewable source of power that never diminished. The Atlanteans supposedly learned to tune this crystal to different frequencies, allowing them to broadcast energy wirelessly to receivers throughout their territory. Casey described how the crystal was positioned to capture energy from the sun, the stars, and the Earth itself. He spoke of complex geometric arrangements that amplified these natural forces, and of priests or scientists who understood the precise frequencies needed to maintain the crystal's operation. Most remarkably, he claimed that the same technology that provided beneficial energy could also be weaponized. According to his visions, the Atlanteans eventually learned to focus the crystal's power into destructive beams capable of destroying aircraft and even leveling mountains. It was this misuse of their technology, Casey claimed, that ultimately led to Atlantis's destruction. While such descriptions might sound like pure science fiction, they contain elements that resonate with real physical phenomena that we understand today. Chapter 45. Crystals and Energy. What modern science tells us. Crystals have always held a special fascination for humans, but modern physics has revealed that their appeal isn't just aesthetic. Crystals possess unique properties that make them incredibly useful for manipulating and controlling energy. The most familiar example is probably the quartz crystal used in watches and electronic devices. Quartz has a property called piezoelectricity. When you apply pressure to it, it generates an electric current. Conversely, when you apply electricity to it, it vibrates at a very precise frequency. This property makes quartz crystals essential components in everything from computer processors to radio transmitters. But crystals can do much more than keep time. Large crystals can store enormous amounts of energy in their molecular structure. They can focus and amplify electromagnetic waves. They can convert one form of energy to another with remarkable efficiency. In recent decades, researchers have discovered that certain crystal formations can exhibit even more exotic properties. Some crystals can generate light when subjected to mechanical stress, a phenomenon called triboluminescence. Others can produce electrical charges when heated or cooled, pyroelectricity. Perhaps most intriguingly, some crystal structures can create what physicists call coherent energy fields, regions where electromagnetic energy becomes highly organized and focused. These fields can transfer energy across distances without wires, much like the wireless energy transmission that Casey described. While we're still far from understanding how to create the kind of massive energy generation that Casey attributed to the Atlanteans, the basic principles he described aren't inconsistent with known physics. Chapter 46. Anti-gravity and levitation. Moving the impossible. Another recurring theme in accounts of Atlantean technology is their supposed ability to move massive stone blocks with ease, as if the stones weighed nothing at all. This has led some researchers to speculate that the Atlanteans had mastered some form of anti-gravity or levitation technology. The idea isn't as far-fetched as it might initially sound. Throughout history, cultures around the world have preserved legends of stones being moved by sound, by mental power, or by mysterious technologies that made heavy objects weightless. Tibetan texts describe monks who could levitate large stones, using trumpet sounds tuned to specific frequencies. Native American legends speak of ancestors who could make stones light by singing to them. Ancient Egyptian texts hint at methods for making construction blocks float during the building of the pyramids. Modern physics has revealed several phenomena that could, in theory, create effects similar to anti-gravity. Acoustic levitation uses sound waves to suspend objects in mid-air. Magnetic levitation can lift objects using electromagnetic fields. Even more exotic possibilities emerge from quantum physics and our growing understanding of space-time itself. Chapter 47. Sound and Levitation. The Power of Frequency. One of the most promising areas of research involves the use of sound waves to manipulate matter. Scientists have successfully used acoustic levitation to suspend small objects in laboratory conditions, proving that the principle is sound. The technique works by creating standing wave patterns in air, regions where sound waves interfere with each other to create areas of high and low pressure. Objects can be trapped in the low-pressure nodes and held suspended without any physical support. Currently, acoustic levitation only works with small, lightweight objects, but researchers are exploring ways to scale up the technology. Some scientists have proposed that with sufficiently powerful sound generators and precise frequency control, it might be possible to levitate much larger objects. This research has led some to reconsider ancient accounts of stones being moved by sound. Could ancient peoples have understood acoustic principles that we're only now rediscovering? Could they have developed sound technologies capable of manipulating massive stone blocks? The acoustic properties of many ancient megalithic sites support this possibility. Stonehenge, the pyramids of Giza, and numerous other ancient structures exhibit remarkable acoustic characteristics. They amplify certain frequencies while dampening others, creating complex sound environments that seem deliberately engineered. Some researchers have measured infrasonic frequencies, sounds below the range of human hearing, at these sites that could potentially interact with stone and earth in ways we don't fully understand. Chapter 47. Electromagnetic Fields and Stone Manipulation. Another possibility involves the use of electromagnetic fields to manipulate stone. Many ancient megalithic sites are built from stones that contain significant amounts of iron and other magnetic materials. If ancient peoples had developed ways to generate powerful electromagnetic fields, they might have been able to move these stones using magnetic forces. This theory is supported by the fact that many ancient sites show evidence of being precisely aligned with Earth's magnetic field. Some researchers have detected unusual electromagnetic anomalies at megalithic sites, suggesting that the builders were aware of and working with magnetic forces. Recent experiments have shown that certain types of stone can be made to exhibit magnetic properties when subjected to specific frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. This raises the intriguing possibility that ancient builders might have known how to temporarily magnetize stones, making them easier to move and position. Chapter 48. Unlimited Energy. Tapping the Zero-Point Field. Perhaps the most extraordinary claim about Atlantean technology is that they had access to unlimited energy, sources of power that never depleted and required no fuel or external input. From our modern perspective, this might seem to violate the fundamental laws of physics, particularly the conservation of energy. But cutting-edge research in quantum physics has revealed that what we think of as empty space is actually filled with enormous amounts of energy. This energy, called zero-point energy, exists even at absolute zero temperature when all other forms of energy have been removed. Theoretical calculations suggest that the amount of zero-point energy in a single cubic meter of space is greater than the energy output of all the stars in the observable universe. If this energy could be harnessed, a huge if, it would indeed provide an unlimited source of power. And remarkably, some researchers believe they've found clues that ancient peoples might have understood principles that could access this energy. Chapter 49. Tesla's Wireless Energy, Rediscovering Ancient Knowledge. The idea of wireless energy transmission isn't new. In the early 20th century, inventor Nikola Tesla conducted extensive experiments in transmitting electrical power through the air without wires. He believed that the Earth itself could serve as a conductor, carrying energy to receivers anywhere on the planet. Tesla's most ambitious project was his Wardenclyffe Tower, built on Long Island, with the goal of creating a worldwide wireless energy system. Although the project was never completed due to financial constraints, Tesla's experiments proved that wireless energy transmission was possible. What's particularly interesting is that Tesla claimed his inspiration came partly from ancient sources. He spoke of studying old texts that described methods for transmitting energy across great distances. He believed that ancient civilizations had understood principles of energy and frequency that modern science had forgotten. Tesla's work with resonance and frequency also bears striking similarities to descriptions of Atlantean crystal technology. He discovered that by matching the resonant frequency of objects, he could cause them to vibrate so violently that they would eventually break apart. A principle he demonstrated dramatically when he nearly destroyed his laboratory building with a small oscillating device. Chapter 50. Modern Discoveries that Support Ancient Knowledge. As our scientific understanding has advanced, we've discovered phenomena that seem to support the possibility that ancient peoples might have had access to advanced energy technologies. Chapter 51. Sonoluminescence. Light from sound. One of the most mysterious phenomena in modern physics is sonoluminescence, the creation of light from sound. When tiny bubbles in certain liquids are subjected to specific sound frequencies, they collapse with such violence that they briefly reach temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun, creating flashes of light. Even more remarkably, the light produced during sonoluminescence appears to be more energetic than the sound energy that created it, suggesting that the process might be tapping into some unknown energy source, possibly even the zero-point field. The discovery of sonoluminescence has led some researchers to wonder whether ancient peoples might have observed and utilized similar phenomena. Could they have developed acoustic technologies that converted sound into light and energy? Could this explain some of the mysterious lighting systems described in ancient temples and underground chambers? Chapter 52. Quantum Physics and Energy Creation. Quantum physics has revealed that what we think of as solid matter is mostly empty space, filled with fields of energy that can, under certain circumstances, spontaneously create matter and energy from apparent nothingness. Experiments have demonstrated the Casimir effect, where energy appears between closely spaced metal plates in a vacuum. They've shown that virtual particles can be made to become real under the right conditions. They've proven that quantum fields can produce measurable forces and effects. While we're still far from understanding how to harness these quantum phenomena for practical energy production, they prove that the universe contains energy sources that we're only beginning to discover. Some researchers have speculated that if ancient peoples had developed a deep understanding of natural harmonics and resonance, they might have stumbled upon ways to access these quantum energy sources without understanding the underlying physics. Chapter 53. Water and Energy. The Overlooked Connection. Another area where modern science is rediscovering ancient wisdom involves the energetic properties of water. For thousands of years, traditional cultures have recognized that water has special properties beyond its chemical composition, that it can store information, respond to sound and vibration, and serve as a medium for various forms of energy. Modern research has confirmed that water has remarkable properties that aren't fully explained by conventional chemistry. Water molecules can form complex, long-lasting structures that seem to store information. Water responds to electromagnetic fields in ways that suggest it might serve as a natural antenna or energy collector. Some researchers have proposed that the combination of water and specific minerals or crystals could create natural energy systems. The idea is that flowing water, when properly channeled through crystalline structures, might generate electrical currents or other forms of usable energy. This concept bears striking similarities to descriptions of Atlantean energy systems, which often involve the combination of crystals, flowing water, and geometric structures designed to focus and amplify natural forces. Chapter 54. Are we rediscovering lost knowledge? As you listen to these modern discoveries and their connections to ancient accounts, a fascinating question emerges. Are we advancing toward genuinely new knowledge? Or are we rediscovering principles that were once well known to our ancestors? Throughout history, there have been periods when human knowledge seemed to advance rapidly, followed by periods of decline and loss. The burning of the Library of Alexandria destroyed countless ancient texts. The fall of the Roman Empire led to the loss of engineering and architectural knowledge that took centuries to recover. If a civilization as advanced as Atlantis really existed and was suddenly destroyed, most of their knowledge would have been lost with them. Only fragments would survive, preserved in legends, myths, and the scattered traditions of survivor populations. Over time, these fragments might have been reinterpreted, embellished, or misunderstood, becoming the basis for stories about magical powers and impossible technologies. But embedded within these stories might be genuine memories of real scientific principles and engineering techniques. Chapter 55. The Pattern of Rediscovery. Remarkably, many of our most significant modern scientific discoveries seem to echo principles that were described in ancient texts, often in symbolic or metaphorical language that we're only now beginning to understand. Ancient alchemists wrote about transmuting elements, something we now do routinely in particle accelerators and nuclear reactors. Hindu texts describe vast cycles of time and multiple dimensions, concepts that have found new relevance in modern cosmology and string theory. Chinese medicine has long recognized energy fields in the human body that Western science is just beginning to study and understand. Could it be that the ancient accounts of Atlantean technology aren't pure fantasy, but rather garbled memories of real scientific achievements? Could the descriptions of crystal power, anti-gravity, and unlimited energy be distorted recollections of technologies that we're only now approaching the ability to recreate? Chapter 56. Too advanced for their time, or perfectly timed. As we near the end of our exploration of Atlantean technology, consider this possibility. Perhaps the Atlanteans weren't ahead of their time at all. Perhaps they were perfectly timed for their era, working with natural principles and energy sources that were more accessible in their time than in ours. If the Earth's magnetic field was different 12,000 years ago, if atmospheric conditions were more conducive to certain types of energy transmission, if the planet's geological structure provided access to energy sources that are no longer available, then the Atlanteans might have been using technologies that were appropriate for their environment. Climate change, geological shifts, and alterations in the Earth's magnetic field could have made their energy technologies obsolete, forcing humanity to develop different approaches to manipulating matter and energy. From this perspective, our modern rediscovery of these principles isn't just scientific progress. It's a return to knowledge that was once commonplace, but had to be abandoned when environmental conditions changed. Part 5. The Destruction Event. Chapter 57. The Younger. Dryas, when the world froze. Our investigation begins with one of the most dramatic climate events in recent Earth history, a period that geologists call the Younger Dryas. This event, which occurred roughly 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, represents one of the most rapid climate changes ever recorded in geological data. To understand the significance of the Younger Dryas, we need to picture the world as it was emerging from the last ice age. For thousands of years, the planet had been gradually warming. Massive ice sheets that had covered much of North America and northern Europe were slowly melting, releasing their water into the oceans. Plant and animal life were expanding into regions that had been frozen wasteland. Early human populations were growing and spreading across newly habitable territories. Then, suddenly, everything changed. Within the span of perhaps just a few decades, possibly even within a single human lifetime, global temperatures plummeted. The warming trend that had been continuing for millennia reversed dramatically. Ice sheets that had been retreating began to advance again. Areas that had become temperate and habitable returned to Arctic conditions. The name Younger Dryas comes from a small Arctic flower called Dryas octopetala. Pollen samples from this period show that this cold climate plant suddenly reappeared across much of Europe and North America, indicating that Arctic conditions had returned to areas that had been warming for thousands of years. Chapter 58. The Speed of Change. What makes the Younger Dryas so remarkable isn't just that it happened, but how quickly it occurred. Ice core data from Greenland shows that temperatures dropped by as much as 15 degrees Celsius in some regions within just a few years. To put this in perspective, that's equivalent to New York City suddenly experiencing the climate of northern Alaska. Ocean circulation patterns changed within decades. Ecosystems that had taken thousands of years to establish were destroyed in a geological instant. Large animal species that had survived the end of the Ice Age, including mammoths, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats, went extinct during this period. For any human civilizations that existed during this time, the Younger Dryas would have been nothing short of apocalyptic. Imagine a thriving coastal civilization suddenly facing not just dramatic cooling, but massive changes in sea level, violent storms, and the collapse of the food webs they depended on. If Atlantis existed during this period, the Younger Dryas event could easily explain its sudden destruction. But what caused this dramatic climate shift? Chapter 59. The Comet Impact Theory, a Cosmic Catastrophe. For many years, scientists believed that the Younger Dryas was caused by changes in ocean circulation when massive freshwater lakes created by melting glaciers suddenly drained into the North Atlantic. While this explanation accounts for some aspects of the climate change, it doesn't fully explain the global nature of the event or its extreme rapidity. Enter a controversial but increasingly supported theory proposed by researchers including Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, and various scientists studying what's called the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. According to this theory, around 12,900 years ago, Earth was struck by fragments of a large comet or asteroid. This wasn't necessarily a single massive impact, but rather a series of impacts as a fragmented cosmic object encountered our planet. The effects would have been immediately devastating and globally catastrophic. The impact theory explained several puzzling features of the Younger Dryas period that had been difficult to account for with purely terrestrial explanations. Chapter 60. Evidence in the Geological Record. Supporters of the impact theory point to several types of evidence found in geological layers dating to the beginning of the Younger Dryas period. First, there are microscopic diamonds and other materials that can only be formed under the extreme pressures and temperatures created by cosmic impacts. These materials have been found at Younger Dryas boundary sites across North America, Europe, and other continents. Second, there are high concentrations of platinum and other elements that are rare on Earth's surface, but common in asteroids and comets. The distribution pattern of these elements suggests they were deposited by atmospheric fallout following impact events. Third, there's evidence of massive wildfires during this period, layers of charcoal and soot that suggest continental-scale burning occurred simultaneously across large areas of North America. Such extensive fires could have been triggered by the heat and debris from cosmic impacts. Fourth, many large animals went extinct during this period, particularly in North America. The extinction pattern suggests a sudden, catastrophic event, rather than gradual climate change. Chapter 61. The Mechanism of Destruction. If the comet impact theory is correct, the destruction would have unfolded in phases, each more devastating than the last. The initial impacts would have released enormous amounts of energy, equivalent to millions of nuclear weapons exploding simultaneously. The immediate effects would have included massive fires, earthquakes, and atmospheric disturbances that could have been seen and felt around the world. But the secondary effects would have been even more destructive. The impacts would have thrown enormous amounts of dust and debris into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and causing rapid global cooling. This impact winter effect would have caused crop failures, ecosystem collapse, and severe climate disruption that lasted for centuries. The impacts might also have destabilized ice sheets, causing massive flooding as ice dams collapsed and glacial lakes drained catastrophically into the oceans. Sea levels would have risen rapidly, flooding coastal areas where human populations were likely concentrated. Chapter 62. Massive flooding. The waters rise. Whether caused by comet impacts, natural ice sheet collapse, or a combination of factors, the geological evidence shows that massive flooding occurred during the Younger Dryas period. Global sea levels rose by approximately 400 feet as the Ice Age came to an end. This flooding wasn't gradual. It happened in surges as ice dams failed and massive volumes of water were suddenly released into the ocean system. To understand the scale of this flooding, consider that a 400-foot rise in sea level would submerge vast areas of what is now dry land. The entire Florida peninsula would disappear beneath the waves. Much of the eastern seaboard of North America would be underwater. The English Channel, the Persian Gulf, and the Mediterranean would expand dramatically, drowning any coastal civilizations. But perhaps most significantly for the Atlantis story, any land masses or islands that existed at or near sea level would have been completely submerged. If Atlantis was a low-lying island civilization, it would have vanished beneath the rising waters, just as Plato described. Chapter 63. The Channeled Scablands. Evidence of catastrophic flooding. Some of the most dramatic evidence for catastrophic flooding during this period can be seen in the landscape of the American Pacific Northwest. The channeled scablands of eastern Washington state show clear evidence of massive flooding that carved enormous channels through solid bedrock. Geologist J. Harlan Bretz first proposed in the 1920s that these features were created by catastrophic flooding, but his ideas were initially rejected because they conflicted with the prevailing belief that geological changes occurred gradually over long periods. We now know that Bretz was correct. The scablands were carved by massive floods when ice dams holding back glacial Lake Missoula repeatedly collapsed, releasing volumes of water equivalent to multiple Lake Tahoes flowing at speeds of up to 80 miles per hour. These floods happened multiple times during the end of the Ice Age, each time carving deeper channels and moving boulders the size of houses hundreds of miles. If such floods occurred in regions where human populations lived, entire civilizations could have been swept away without a trace. Chapter 64. Civilization Reset Button Pressed. Imagine you're living in a thriving coastal civilization 12,900 years ago. Your people have developed agriculture, built cities, mastered astronomy and engineering. Trade networks connect your civilization to others around the world. Knowledge and culture are flowering. Then, in the span of a few years or even months, everything changes. Cosmic impacts light up the sky and shake the earth. Massive fires burn across continents. The climate shifts dramatically toward cold. Sea levels rise rapidly, flooding coastal cities. The very foundations of civilization crumble. This is what researchers mean when they talk about the civilization reset button being pressed. Any advanced human societies that existed before the Younger Dryas would have been devastated. Populations would have been scattered, knowledge would have been lost, and survivors would have been forced to start over in a much harsher world. The few who survived would have found themselves in a post-apocalyptic landscape where the old ways of life were no longer possible. They would have been forced to become hunter-gatherers again, losing much of the accumulated knowledge and technology of their ancestors. Chapter 65. The Survivors. Keepers of ancient knowledge. But not all knowledge would have been lost. In any major catastrophe, some people survive, and they carry with them memories of what came before. These survivors would have preserved what they could of their ancestors' wisdom, passing it down through oral traditions, symbols, and eventually, when conditions allowed, through new institutions designed to protect and transmit ancient knowledge. Chapter 66: Mystery Schools, the Guardians of Secrets. Throughout the ancient world, we find evidence of mystery schools, secretive organizations that claim to possess ancient wisdom passed down from time immemorial. These schools, found in Egypt, Greece, India, and other ancient civilizations, taught their initiates about mathematics, astronomy, geometry, and what they called the sacred sciences. The Egyptian mystery schools spoke of knowledge that came from the first time, a golden age when gods walked among men and taught them the secrets of civilization. Greek mystery schools claimed to preserve wisdom from Atlantis itself. Hindu traditions spoke of knowledge from previous world ages that had been destroyed and renewed multiple times. These schools were highly secretive, requiring initiates to undergo years of preparation before being trusted with their most sacred teachings. They used symbols, allegories, and coded language to protect their knowledge from those who might misuse it. Could these mystery schools have been founded by survivors of pre-flood civilizations? Were they attempting to preserve scientific and technological knowledge from a more advanced age? The parallels between their teachings and modern scientific discoveries suggest this might be more than mere coincidence. Chapter 67: The Megalithic Builders, Inheritors of Lost Knowledge. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for advanced pre-flood civilizations is the sudden appearance, around 11,000 years ago, of sophisticated megalithic architecture around the world. Sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the earliest levels of Stonehenge in England, and massive stone structures in South America, all appeared relatively suddenly in the archaeological record, displaying levels of sophisticated planning, astronomical knowledge, and engineering capability that seemed to exceed what we would expect from recently nomadic hunter-gatherer populations. Chapter 68: Göbekli Tepe, the temple that rewrote history. Perhaps the most remarkable of these sites is Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. Built approximately 11,500 years ago, just after the end of the Younger Dryas period, it consists of massive stone circles featuring precisely carved pillars weighing up to 50 tons each. The pillars are decorated with sophisticated relief carvings of animals, abstract symbols, and humanoid figures. The site required advanced planning, sophisticated tools, and the coordinated labor of large groups of skilled workers. Most remarkably, it appears to have been deliberately buried around 8,000 years ago, as if its builders wanted to preserve it for future discovery. Göbekli Tepe predates Stonehenge by about 6,000 years, and the Egyptian pyramids by about 7,000 years. According to conventional archaeological timelines, the people who built it should have been simple hunter-gatherers just beginning to experiment with agriculture. Instead, the site demonstrates knowledge of astronomy, precision stone cutting, complex engineering, and artistic sophistication that suggests its builders had access to a much more advanced knowledge base than previously thought possible for that time period. Chapter 69: Who taught the builders? The question that Göbekli Tepe raises is, where did its builders acquire their knowledge and skills? The site appears suddenly in the archaeological record, without the gradual development we might expect to see in a technology that was being developed from scratch. One possibility is that the builders of Göbekli Tepe were taught by survivors of more advanced pre-flood civilizations. These teachers might have been refugees from coastal cities destroyed by rising sea levels, carrying with them the accumulated knowledge of thousands of years of civilization. As these survivors settled in the highlands of Turkey, safe from the flooding that had destroyed their homelands, they might have begun the long process of rebuilding civilization. Göbekli Tepe could represent one of their first major projects, a temple or observatory designed to preserve and transmit their astronomical and engineering knowledge to future generations. The deliberate burial of the site around 8,000 years ago supports this interpretation. Rather than allowing the complex to fall into ruin, the builders carefully covered it with tons of earth, creating artificial hills that perfectly preserved the structures beneath. This suggests they wanted to ensure the site would survive for future discovery when humanity was ready to rediscover its messages. Chapter 70. Global Patterns of Megalithic Construction. Göbekli Tepe isn't an isolated anomaly. Around the world we find evidence of sophisticated stone construction appearing relatively suddenly in the archaeological record following the end of the last ice age. In Peru, the earliest levels of sites like Sacsayhuaman show precision stone cutting that rivals anything achieved by later civilizations. In England, the earliest phases of Stonehenge demonstrate sophisticated astronomical knowledge. In Egypt, the precision of the Great Pyramid suggests access to mathematical and engineering knowledge that seems to appear fully formed rather than gradually developed. These sites share certain characteristics. They demonstrate advanced astronomical knowledge. They show precision in construction that's difficult to achieve even today, and they often incorporate measurements and proportions that encode mathematical constants and relationships that weren't supposedly discovered until thousands of years later. Could all of these sites have been built by populations that had been taught by survivors of advanced pre-flood civilizations? The global distribution and shared characteristics suggest that knowledge was being transmitted across vast distances, possibly by populations of survivors who were working to re-establish civilization in suitable locations around the world. Chapter 71. Did Atlanteans survive and rebuild? As you consider these possibilities, a fascinating picture emerges. Rather than being completely destroyed, some Atlanteans, or members of other advanced pre-flood civilizations, might have survived the catastrophe and dedicated themselves to preserving and transmitting their knowledge. These survivors would have faced enormous challenges. The world they knew was gone, destroyed by climate change and flooding. The technological infrastructure that supported their advanced civilization was lost. They would have been forced to adapt to much more primitive conditions while trying to preserve what they could of their ancestors' achievements. Over generations, they might have established themselves as teachers and guides to the scattered human populations that were beginning to rebuild after the catastrophe. They would have taught practical skills like agriculture and animal domestication, but they would also have transmitted more advanced knowledge, astronomy, mathematics, engineering, and perhaps even fragments of their technological understanding. These teacher survivors might have been remembered by later cultures as gods, culture heroes, or wise beings who appeared after a great flood to help humanity rebuild civilization. Many cultures around the world preserve traditions of such figures, beings who taught humanity the arts of civilization after a world-destroying catastrophe. Chapter 72. The Pattern of Renewal. What emerges from this analysis is a pattern that appears repeatedly throughout human history, the cycle of rise, catastrophe, and renewal. Advanced civilizations develop over thousands of years, only to be destroyed by natural disasters, climate change, or other catastrophes. Some knowledge survives through refugees and survivors who become the seeds of new civilizations. This pattern suggests that human advancement isn't necessarily a straight line of progress. Instead, it might be more like a spiral, with each new cycle of civilization building on the preserved wisdom of previous cycles, gradually advancing toward higher levels of achievement. From this perspective, our current civilization might not be humanity's first attempt at advanced technology and global organization. We might be the latest iteration in a long series of human civilizations, each building on the foundations laid by their predecessors. Part 6. Modern Cover-Up. Chapter 73. The Academic Fortress, Protecting Established Truth. To understand why revolutionary ideas about ancient civilizations face such resistance, we need to appreciate how the academic world operates. Universities, research institutions, and scholarly journals form what some call an academic fortress, a system designed to preserve and validate accepted knowledge. Within this system, careers are built on specific interpretations of history and archaeology. Professors spend decades developing expertise in particular time periods and civilizations. Their reputations, tenure, and funding depend on maintaining and expanding upon established frameworks of understanding. Imagine you're a professor who has spent 30 years teaching that civilization began around 5,000 years ago with the rise of Mesopotamian cities. You've written books, trained graduate students, and built your entire professional identity around this timeline. Then someone presents evidence suggesting that advanced civilizations existed 12,000 years ago. Accepting this evidence wouldn't just mean revising a few textbooks. It would mean acknowledging that much of your life's work was built on incomplete or incorrect assumptions. This creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable tension that arises when new information conflicts with existing beliefs. Rather than embrace paradigm-shifting discoveries, many academics unconsciously resist them, finding ways to dismiss or explain away evidence that challenges their established worldview. Chapter 74. The Peer Review. Gatekeepers. The academic system reinforces this resistance through peer review, the process by which scholarly articles are evaluated before publication. While peer review serves important quality control functions, it can also act as a barrier to revolutionary ideas. Papers that challenge fundamental assumptions about human history are often rejected not because their evidence is flawed, but because their conclusions are too radical for reviewers who have invested their careers in conventional interpretations. Reviewers may demand impossibly high standards of proof for unconventional theories, while accepting much lower standards for research that supports established paradigms. This creates a circular problem. Revolutionary ideas can't get published because they lack peer support, but they can't gain peer support because they can't get published. Researchers who persist in pursuing unconventional theories may find themselves marginalized, denied funding, or even forced out of academic positions. The result is that truly paradigm-shifting discoveries may take decades to gain acceptance, even when the evidence is compelling. The scientific acceptance of continental drift took over 50 years. The recognition that impacts from space have shaped Earth's history faced similar delays. Perhaps the evidence for advanced ancient civilizations is following the same pattern. Chapter 75. Religious opposition, challenging sacred stories. Academic resistance isn't the only force opposing new interpretations of ancient history. Religious institutions have their own reasons for preferring conventional timelines and opposing evidence of advanced pre-flood civilizations. Many world religions include creation stories and historical accounts that place humanity's origins within specific timeframes. Young Earth creationists believe the entire universe is only about 6,000 years old, making any evidence of advanced ancient civilizations deeply problematic for their worldview. But the conflict isn't limited to fundamentalist interpretations. More moderate religious perspectives also struggle with evidence of sophisticated pre-flood civilizations, particularly if such evidence suggests that human achievement and knowledge have followed cyclical rather than progressive patterns. The idea that previous civilizations might have achieved technological and spiritual heights comparable to or exceeding our own challenges, the notion that humanity is progressing towards some ultimate fulfillment of divine plan. It suggests instead that human history might be characterized by repeated rises and falls, with no guarantee that our current civilization represents the pinnacle of human achievement. Religious institutions, like academic ones, have significant investments in maintaining their established interpretations of history and human purpose. Educational systems influenced by religious perspectives may therefore resist including evidence of advanced ancient civilizations in their curricula, even when that evidence meets scientific standards. Chapter 76. Government secrecy. What do they really know? Perhaps the most controversial aspect of the modern cover-up theory involves government agencies and their potential knowledge of ancient discoveries. While it might sound like conspiracy thinking, There are legitimate reasons why governments might want to control information about certain archaeological discoveries. Consider the implications if definitive proof of advanced ancient civilizations were discovered. Such proof could destabilize established religious and cultural narratives that help maintain social order. It could challenge national claims to territory if ancient civilizations predating current populations were proven to have existed in specific regions. It could even affect economic systems if ancient technologies were discovered that threatened current industrial and energy interests. Government agencies around the world maintain classified archaeological programs. In the United States, certain discoveries on federal land are restricted from public access. Military installations sometimes encompass areas of archaeological significance that remain off-limits to civilian researchers. The involvement of intelligence agencies in archaeological expeditions isn't entirely theoretical. During the Cold War, both American and Soviet intelligence services supported archaeological missions that served dual purposes, advancing scientific knowledge while gathering strategic information about foreign territories and resources. Chapter 77. Follow the Money and Power. To understand why certain discoveries might be suppressed, it's helpful to follow the money and power structures that could be affected by revolutionary archaeological findings. The current global economic system is built largely on the control and distribution of energy resources: oil, natural gas, coal, and increasingly, renewable energy technologies. If ancient civilizations possessed advanced energy technologies based on different principles, whether involving crystals, sound frequencies, or other methods, the discovery and development of such technologies could potentially disrupt established energy industries worth trillions of dollars. Similarly, if ancient civilizations possessed advanced construction or manufacturing techniques that could be recreated with modern materials and tools, such knowledge could revolutionize entire industries. Companies and nations that control current construction and manufacturing technologies would face enormous disruption. Educational institutions themselves represent massive economic interests. Publishers of textbooks, developers of curricula, and the vast network of schools and universities all have financial investments in existing educational frameworks. Fundamental changes to our understanding of human history would require rewriting countless textbooks, reorganizing curricula, and retraining educators, a process that could cost billions of dollars and threaten existing educational power structures. Chapter 78. Recent Discoveries. Being hidden? While academic and institutional resistance might explain general skepticism toward unconventional theories, some researchers believe that specific recent discoveries are being actively concealed from public view. Chapter 79. Antarctica Expeditions. The Secretive Continent. Antarctica has become a focal point for speculation about hidden discoveries. The continent is governed by the Antarctic Treaty, which officially designates it as a scientific preserve dedicated to peaceful research. However, the practical effect of the treaty is that access to Antarctica is tightly controlled by government agencies. Recent decades have seen increasing numbers of scientific expeditions to Antarctica, many of which operate under strict security protocols. Some expeditions are classified or partially classified, with their findings restricted from immediate public release. While this might be explained by legitimate scientific or environmental concerns, it has also fueled speculation about what might be hidden beneath the ice. Satellite imagery has revealed unusual geometric formations beneath Antarctic ice, structures that appear too regular to be entirely natural. While these are most likely geological features, their discovery has generally been announced in low-key scientific papers rather than major public announcements. Perhaps most intriguingly, several prominent researchers and public figures have made unexpected visits to Antarctica in recent years, often with little public explanation of their purposes. These visits have included politicians, business leaders, and even religious figures, leading to speculation about what might be drawing such diverse interest to the frozen continent. Chapter 80. Ocean Floor Mapping. Charting unknown territories. The systematic mapping of ocean floors represents one of the most significant scientific undertakings of our time. Advanced sonar systems can now create detailed maps of underwater terrain, potentially revealing structures or formations that could reshape our understanding of ancient history. However, much of this mapping work is conducted by military agencies or contractors working for military purposes. The data collected often remains classified or is released only in limited forms that might obscure significant discoveries. Researchers have noted that certain areas of the ocean floor remain unmapped or poorly mapped despite the availability of technology to survey them. Some of these areas coincide with locations that have been proposed as possible sites for Atlantis or other lost civilizations. Commercial satellite companies have the capability to detect underwater structures using various remote sensing techniques. However, the imagery and data from these surveys are often restricted or made available only to government and academic clients, limiting public access to potentially significant discoveries. Chapter 81. Satellite Imagery, Digital Censorship. One of the most controversial aspects of the modern cover-up theory involves claims that satellite imagery of certain archaeological sites has been deliberately altered or obscured to hide unusual structures. Researchers have pointed to examples where high-resolution satellite images of remote areas seem to show geometric patterns or structures that are subsequently blurred or altered in later versions of the same imagery. While such changes could be explained by updates to imaging technology or processing methods, some observers believe they represent deliberate censorship. The technology certainly exists for such censorship. Digital image processing can easily alter or obscure specific features while leaving surrounding areas unchanged. Major providers of satellite imagery, such as Google Earth, already blur or pixelate sensitive military installations and other restricted sites. If significant archaeological discoveries were made in remote locations, particularly those with potential national security implications, there would be precedent for restricting public access to detailed imagery of such sites. Chapter 82. The Information Control System. Modern information control is more sophisticated than simple censorship. Rather than outright suppressing information, contemporary systems tend to manage information flow through several mechanisms. First is the overwhelming volume of information available today. Significant discoveries can be effectively hidden by ensuring they receive minimal publicity and are buried among countless other news items and scientific papers. Most people lack the time and expertise to distinguish between routine discoveries and potentially paradigm-shifting findings. Second is the specialization of modern media. Archaeological and scientific discoveries are typically reported only in specialized publications that reach narrow audiences. Mainstream media outlets rarely have the expertise to evaluate the significance of complex archaeological findings, so potentially important discoveries may receive little general attention. Third is the complexity of modern scientific research itself. Most people, including many scientists working in other fields, lack the specialized knowledge needed to evaluate archaeological evidence or understand its implications. This creates opportunities for significant discoveries to be dismissed or misrepresented without effective public scrutiny. Chapter 83. Too dangerous for public knowledge? Could some discoveries about ancient civilizations be considered too dangerous for widespread public knowledge? While this might seem far-fetched, there are legitimate scenarios where such concerns could arise. If ancient civilizations possessed advanced weapons technologies, detailed knowledge of such technologies could potentially be used to develop new forms of warfare. Even defensive technologies might be dangerous if they could be adapted for offensive purposes. If ancient energy technologies were discovered, premature release of such information could lead to dangerous experimentation by individuals or groups without proper safety protocols. Advanced energy manipulation could theoretically be used to create weapons or cause environmental damage. Perhaps most concerning would be discoveries that fundamentally challenge social stability. If evidence emerged that human civilization has repeatedly risen to great heights only to collapse catastrophically, Such knowledge could potentially cause despair, social unrest, or fatalistic attitudes that undermine efforts to address current global challenges. From this perspective, a gradual, controlled release of information about ancient civilizations might be seen as more responsible than immediate full disclosure of potentially destabilizing discoveries. Chapter 84. The Gradual Revelation. Interestingly, if there is a cover-up of ancient discoveries, it doesn't appear to be absolute. Information about advanced ancient civilizations continues to emerge through various channels: independent researchers, documentary films, alternative media, and even mainstream scientific publications. This pattern suggests that if information is being controlled, it might be through managed disclosure rather than complete suppression. Potentially significant discoveries might be released gradually, allowing public consciousness to adjust slowly to new interpretations of human history. Such an approach would allow established institutions time to adapt their frameworks and methodologies while avoiding the social disruption that might result from sudden dramatic revelations about our ancient past. Part 7. Connection to Today. Chapter 85. Are we living through Atlantis 2.0? Look around at our modern world with fresh eyes, as if you were an observer from some distant time trying to understand our civilization. What patterns would you notice? What themes would emerge from the daily flow of our news, our technologies, our social structures? You might observe a civilization that has achieved remarkable technological mastery, the ability to communicate instantly across the globe, to travel at speeds that would seem magical to earlier generations, to manipulate matter at the molecular level, and to harness energy sources that release the power of the stars themselves. You might also notice a civilization that seems increasingly disconnected from the natural world that sustains it, more focused on short-term gains than long-term consequences, and perhaps losing touch with the wisdom and spiritual insights that once guided human societies. Chapter 86. Technology Obsession, the Double-Edged Sword. According to Plato's account, the Atlanteans became obsessed with their technological capabilities, using their advanced knowledge primarily for material gain and power rather than wisdom and harmony. They developed weapons of incredible destructive potential and used their technology to dominate rather than nurture. Does this sound familiar? Our modern world has achieved technological capabilities that would seem godlike to previous generations. We can split atoms, manipulate genes, create artificial intelligence, and alter the planet's climate through our industrial activities. We have weapons capable of destroying all life on Earth, and we're developing technologies that could fundamentally alter what it means to be human. Yet, like the Atlanteans, we often seem to develop these technologies without fully considering their long-term consequences or their effect on our relationship with the natural world. We create first and ask questions about wisdom and ethics later. Consider our relationship with artificial intelligence. We're developing systems that may soon exceed human intelligence in many areas, yet we have little consensus about how to ensure these systems remain beneficial rather than harmful. We're rushing toward technological singularity without fully understanding what we're creating. Our social media and digital technologies have connected the world in ways previous generations could never have imagined, yet they've also created new forms of addiction, isolation, and social manipulation. We've gained the ability to access all human knowledge instantly, yet we seem more confused and divided than ever about basic truths. Like the Atlanteans with their crystal technology, we've developed powerful tools without fully developing the wisdom to use them responsibly. Chapter 87. The Climate Change. Repeating Ancient Mistakes. Perhaps the most striking parallel between our civilization and Atlantis lies in our relationship with the planet's natural systems. According to various accounts, the Atlanteans' advanced technology eventually disrupted the natural forces that sustained their civilization, leading to the catastrophic events that destroyed their homeland. Today, we face our own climate crisis, the result of industrial technologies that have fundamentally altered Earth's atmosphere, oceans, and weather patterns. Like the Atlanteans, we've developed the power to change our planetary environment, but we've used that power without fully understanding or respecting the complex systems we're affecting. The parallels are sobering. Both civilizations achieved unprecedented technological power. Both use that power to exploit natural resources on a massive scale. Both seem to believe they could master nature rather than work in harmony with it. And both faced the prospect of catastrophic consequences when natural systems began to respond to their interventions. Our current climate crisis involves rising sea levels that threaten to flood coastal cities around the world, the same kind of flooding that supposedly destroyed Atlantis. We're experiencing increasingly violent weather events, disruptions to agricultural systems, and the potential for social collapse as populations are forced to migrate from areas that become uninhabitable. The question that haunts many researchers is whether we're approaching the same kind of tipping point that destroyed previous advanced civilizations. Are we in the early stages of our own version of the catastrophe that sank Atlantis beneath the waves? Chapter 88. Social Collapse. The Patterns of Decline. Plato's account describes how Atlantean society gradually became corrupted by its own success. The people grew wealthy and comfortable, but they also became materialistic, aggressive, and disconnected from the spiritual principles that had originally guided their civilization. Looking at our modern world, we can see similar patterns emerging. Despite unprecedented material prosperity, many developed societies are experiencing rising inequality, social fragmentation, and loss of shared values and purposes. Political systems that once seemed stable are experiencing unprecedented polarization and dysfunction. Traditional institutions, religious organizations, educational systems, media outlets are losing public trust and authority. People increasingly live in separate information bubbles, unable to agree on basic facts about reality. Social media and digital technologies, while connecting us globally, have also enabled new forms of manipulation and division. Foreign and domestic actors can influence elections and social movements through targeted disinformation campaigns. Artificial intelligence systems can create convincing fake videos and documents, making it increasingly difficult to distinguish truth from deception. Economic inequality has reached levels not seen since the early 20th century. A small elite controls an ever larger share of global wealth, while large portions of the population struggle with economic insecurity, despite living in theoretically prosperous societies. These patterns of social decay and division mirror descriptions of Atlantis in its final period, when the civilization had achieved great material success, but was losing the social cohesion and moral clarity that had made its achievements possible. Chapter 89. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. The famous observation that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes suggests that while specific events don't recur exactly, similar patterns and themes echo across different time periods and civilizations. If we look at the rise and fall of civilizations throughout recorded history, we can see recurring patterns: periods of growth and expansion, followed by peaks of achievement, then gradual decline often accelerated by environmental challenges, social division, and the inability to adapt to changing circumstances. The Roman Empire, the Maya civilization, the Khmer Empire, and many others have followed variations of this pattern. Each achieved remarkable levels of technological, architectural, and organizational sophistication. Each seemed invincible at its height. Each ultimately collapsed when internal problems combined with external pressures. If Atlantis represents the memory of an even more advanced civilization that followed this same pattern, then we need to ask, are we destined to repeat the cycle? Or can we learn from these historical patterns and choose a different path? The answer may depend on whether we can develop the wisdom to match our technological power, something that previous civilizations, including possibly Atlantis, failed to achieve. Chapter 90. What we can learn, the wisdom of the ages. If the story of Atlantis is a warning from our ancient past, what specific lessons might it be trying to teach us? What wisdom might our predecessors be attempting to transmit across the millennia? Chapter 91. respect for nature, working with, not against, natural systems. Perhaps the most crucial lesson from the Atlantis story is the importance of maintaining harmony with natural systems rather than trying to dominate or control them. According to various accounts, the Atlanteans' downfall came when their technology disrupted the natural forces that sustained their civilization. Our modern environmental crisis suggests we're making similar mistakes. We've treated nature as something to be conquered and exploited, rather than as a complex system to be understood and respected. We've assumed that technological solutions can solve problems created by technology without addressing the underlying attitudes that created those problems in the first place. Indigenous cultures around the world have long understood principles of living in harmony with natural systems, taking only what is needed, considering the impact of actions on future generations, and recognizing the interconnectedness of all life. These aren't primitive concepts. They represent sophisticated understandings of sustainability that our technologically advanced civilization has largely forgotten. The lesson of Atlantis suggests that true advancement isn't just about developing more powerful technologies, but about developing the wisdom to use those technologies in ways that support, rather than undermine, the natural systems that sustain all life. Chapter 92. Technology Balance. Power must be matched by wisdom. Another crucial lesson involves the relationship between technological power and moral wisdom. Throughout the Atlantis story runs the theme that the civilization's destruction came not from their technology itself, but from their failure to use that technology wisely. This lesson is particularly relevant today as we develop increasingly powerful technologies, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, and others, that could either solve humanity's greatest challenges or create unprecedented new dangers. The key insight from the Atlantis story is that technological development must be balanced by ethical and spiritual development. A civilization that advances technologically without advancing in wisdom eventually destroys itself. This suggests that our education systems, research institutions, and technology companies need to place much greater emphasis on ethics, philosophy, and the long-term consequences of technological development. We need to ask not just, can we build this, but should we build this? And what will be the long-term impact on human society and the natural world? Chapter 93. Spiritual Development. Beyond Material Progress. Perhaps the deepest lesson from the Atlantis story involves the importance of spiritual and moral development alongside material progress. According to Plato's account, the Atlanteans initially possessed both advanced technology and wisdom, but they gradually became focused purely on material gain and power. In our modern world, we've achieved unprecedented material prosperity and technological capability, but many people report feeling spiritually empty, disconnected from purpose and meaning. Despite having access to more information, entertainment, and material goods than any previous generation, rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide continue to rise in many developed countries. The Atlantis story suggests that lasting civilization requires not just technological advancement, but also the cultivation of wisdom, compassion, and understanding of our place in the larger cosmos. Material progress without spiritual development ultimately leads to the kind of corruption and decline that destroys civilizations from within. This doesn't necessarily mean returning to traditional religious frameworks, but it does suggest the need for practices and institutions that help people develop wisdom, empathy, and a sense of connection to something larger than their immediate material interests. Chapter 94. The Warning They Left Us. If we view the Atlantis story as a warning transmitted across thousands of years, what is that warning telling us? Perhaps it's this: civilizations that achieve great technological power without developing corresponding wisdom will eventually destroy themselves. The specific mechanism of destruction may vary: flooding, climate change, war, social collapse, or some combination of factors. But the underlying pattern remains the same. Power without wisdom is ultimately self-destructive. This warning becomes particularly urgent when we consider that our current civilization possesses more destructive power than any previous society in human history. We have the ability to alter the planet's climate, to create artificial organisms, to build weapons that could end all life on Earth, and to develop artificial intelligences that might surpass human capabilities entirely. If we use these powers without wisdom, if we pursue short-term gains without considering long-term consequences, if we continue to treat the natural world as something to be dominated rather than respected, we may be heading for our own version of the catastrophe that supposedly destroyed Atlantis. But the warning also implies hope. If we can learn from the mistakes of our predecessors, if we can develop wisdom to match our power, if we can remember our connection to the natural world and to each other, we might be able to avoid repeating the cycle of rise and fall that has characterized so many previous civilizations. Chapter 95. Breaking the Cycle. The ultimate message of the Atlantis story might be that we have a choice. We can continue following the patterns that have led previous civilizations to destruction, or we can consciously choose to develop differently. This choice requires recognizing that true progress isn't just about developing more powerful technologies or accumulating more material wealth. True progress involves developing wisdom, cultivating harmony with natural systems, and creating social structures that support the flourishing of all life. It requires remembering that we are not separate from nature but part of it, that our technologies should serve life rather than dominate it, and that the measure of a civilization's success isn't its power to destroy, but its ability to create beauty, wisdom, and harmony. If the Atlanteans really existed, if they really achieved great heights before falling into catastrophic decline, then their story offers both a warning and an opportunity. We can learn from their mistakes, avoid their fate, and perhaps create a form of civilization that achieves both technological advancement and spiritual wisdom. As you prepare for sleep, let your mind rest on this possibility, that we are living at a crucial moment in human history, when the choices we make will determine whether our civilization follows the path of Atlantis toward destruction, or pioneers a new way of living that balances power with wisdom, technology with nature, and material progress with spiritual development. The story of Atlantis, whether historical fact or timeless metaphor, reminds us that we are not the first humans to face these challenges, and we may not be the last. But we are the ones alive today, with the opportunity to choose consciously and wisely, guided by the warnings and wisdom of those who came before us. Perhaps that is the greatest gift the story of Atlantis offers us, not just the mystery of a lost civilization, but the inspiration to create a found civilization, one that learns from the past to build a wiser future. Mind-blowing conclusion. As our journey through the mystery of Atlantis draws to a close, it's time to step back and consider everything we've discovered together. We've traveled from the ancient libraries of Egypt to the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, from the frozen expanses of Antarctica to the circular ridges of the Sahara Desert. We've explored underwater cities, examined impossible technologies, and contemplated the rise and fall of civilizations across thousands of years. Now, as you settle into the peaceful quiet of the night, let's bring all these pieces together and consider what they might really mean. The real truth. A paradigm shift in understanding. After examining all the evidence, the geological records, the underwater discoveries, the ancient technologies, the global flood stories, the mysterious megalithic sites, a picture emerges that challenges everything we thought we knew about our past. Atlantis was probably real. The weight of evidence suggests that Plato wasn't simply creating a philosophical allegory when he described Atlantis. Too many details align with real geological events. Too many parallels exist with other ancient accounts, and too many mysterious archaeological sites remain unexplained for the entire story to be fiction. But the reality of Atlantis may be even more extraordinary than Plato imagined. Rather than a single island civilization, the evidence points to something far more profound, a lost chapter of human history that has been systematically overlooked or forgotten by mainstream archaeology. The Younger Dryas catastrophe 12,900 years ago represents a genuine global reset point in human civilization. The rapid climate change, massive flooding, and possible cosmic impacts of that period would have been sufficient to destroy any advanced civilizations that existed at the time. The fact that this timing aligns almost perfectly with Plato's date for Atlantis is difficult to dismiss as mere coincidence. Multiple locations, global civilization. Perhaps the most mind-blowing realization is that we may have been thinking about Atlantis too narrowly. Instead of searching for one lost city, we should be looking for evidence of a global civilization, an interconnected network of advanced settlements that spanned the ancient world. This would explain why we find similar megalithic architecture on different continents, why flood stories appear in cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other, and why advanced astronomical knowledge appears simultaneously in widely separated civilizations around 10,000, 12,000 years ago. The various location theories we explored, the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, Antarctica, the Sahara, might all be partially correct. Each could represent a different center or colony of a vast civilization that extended across the globe during a time when sea levels were lower and climate patterns were different. This global civilization would have been connected by maritime trade routes, shared technologies, and common knowledge systems. When the Great Catastrophe struck, it wouldn't have destroyed just one city. It would have shattered an entire world system, leaving only scattered survivors to preserve fragments of their ancestors' wisdom. We're finding more evidence every year. The exciting reality is that evidence supporting this revolutionary view of human history continues to accumulate. Every year brings new discoveries that push back the timeline of human achievement and reveal greater sophistication in ancient civilizations than we previously imagined. Göbekli Tepe was discovered only in the 1990s, and it immediately required archaeologists to revise their understanding of early human capabilities. The extent of the site is still being revealed, and similar sites are being discovered across Turkey and surrounding regions. Underwater archaeology continues to reveal submerged settlements and structures that predate the supposed beginning of civilization. New techniques in sonar mapping and underwater robotics are making it possible to explore areas of the ocean floor that were previously inaccessible. Satellite archaeology is revealing ancient structures and settlement patterns that are invisible from ground level. Climate change, while presenting enormous challenges for our civilization, is also exposing archaeological sites that have been hidden under ice or buried by changing landscapes. Most remarkably, genetic studies of ancient populations are revealing patterns of migration and interaction that suggest much more complex and widespread civilizations than previously thought possible. The greatest story never fully told. What emerges from all this evidence is perhaps the greatest story in human history, a story that has never been fully told because the evidence has been scattered across different disciplines, different continents, and different time periods. It's the story of how humanity has not progressed in a simple, linear fashion from primitive to advanced, but has instead followed cycles of achievement and collapse, wisdom and forgetting, rise and renewal. It suggests that we are not the first humans to achieve advanced technology, global communication, and sophisticated understanding of natural forces. This story reframes our entire understanding of human potential and human history. Instead of seeing ourselves as the pinnacle of human achievement, we might better understand ourselves as the latest chapter in a much longer story of human striving and accomplishment. What happens next? The future of discovery. As we look toward the future, several trends suggest that the truth about advanced ancient civilizations will become increasingly difficult to ignore or suppress. New technologies, new possibilities. Technology continues to advance at an exponential pace, and many of these advances directly enhance our ability to explore and understand the ancient world. Ground-penetrating radar can reveal buried structures without excavation. Satellite imagery can detect subtle variations in surface features that indicate underground ruins. DNA analysis can trace ancient migration patterns and reveal connections between distant populations. Perhaps most exciting, artificial intelligence is beginning to be applied to archaeological research. AI systems can analyze vast databases of archaeological information, identify patterns that human researchers might miss, and even predict where significant discoveries might be found. Underwater exploration technology continues to improve, making it possible to survey and excavate sites in deep ocean environments that were previously impossible to reach. As this technology becomes more affordable and accessible, we can expect the acceleration in underwater archaeological discoveries. Ocean exploration, the final frontier. One of the most remarkable facts about our current knowledge of Earth is that we know more about the surface of Mars than we do about our own ocean floors. Less than 20% of the ocean floor has been mapped in detail, and vast areas remain completely unexplored. This is particularly significant for the Atlantis mystery because any civilization destroyed by rising sea levels 12,000 years ago would now be buried under hundreds of feet of water and sediment. The ruins of ancient coastal cities might exist in perfect preservation on the ocean floor, waiting for the technology and resources needed to discover them. Recent deep-sea expeditions continue to reveal surprising discoveries: underwater rivers, enormous geological formations, and ecosystems that challenge our understanding of life on Earth. If artificial structures exist in the deep ocean, they will eventually be found as exploration technology continues to advance. Climate change, revealing hidden secrets. While climate change presents enormous challenges for our current civilization, it's also beginning to reveal archaeological secrets that have been hidden for thousands of years. As ice sheets melt, as water levels change, and as weather patterns shift, previously inaccessible areas become available for exploration. Melting ice in the Arctic is revealing preserved remains of ancient ecosystems and possibly ancient human settlements. Changing water levels in lakes and reservoirs around the world occasionally expose archaeological sites that have been submerged for millennia. Severe weather events, while destructive, sometimes reveal buried structures or artifacts by exposing layers of earth that would otherwise remain undisturbed. The truth will surface. All of these trends point toward an inevitable conclusion. If advanced ancient civilizations really existed, evidence of their existence will eventually surface. Technology will continue to improve, exploration will continue to expand, and hidden sites will continue to be revealed by environmental changes. The question isn't whether the truth will emerge, but when and how. Will it come through official academic channels, or will it be discovered by independent researchers using new technologies? Will it be a gradual process of accumulating evidence, or will there be dramatic discoveries that force sudden revisions to our understanding of history? Final revelations. Questions that change everything. As we reach the end of our exploration, we're left with questions that have the power to transform how we see ourselves and our place in history. What if everything we've been taught about history is wrong? This isn't just a question about ancient civilizations, it's a question about the nature of knowledge itself. How much of what we consider established historical fact might actually be incomplete or incorrect? How many assumptions about human development might need to be revised in light of new evidence? If advanced civilizations existed before recorded history, it means that human potential is far greater than we've been taught to believe. It means that the challenges we face today, climate change, technological disruption, social fragmentation, are not unique to our era, but are part of recurring patterns that humans have faced and sometimes overcome before. What if we're not the first advanced civilization? This question strikes at the heart of modern assumptions about progress and development. We tend to think of human history as a steady progression from primitive to advanced, with our current civilization representing the pinnacle of human achievement. But what if that's wrong? What if we're actually following in the footsteps of previous civilizations that achieved comparable or even superior levels of technological and spiritual development? What if some of our greatest discoveries are actually rediscoveries of ancient knowledge? This possibility suggests that we should approach our current challenges with more humility and more openness to learning from the past. If previous civilizations found ways to work with natural forces rather than against them, if they developed sustainable technologies and harmonious social systems, we need to understand how they did it. What if Atlantis is trying to warn us? Perhaps the most profound question is whether the story of Atlantis, preserved through thousands of years of oral tradition and written records, represents an intentional message from our ancient predecessors to us. If the Atlanteans achieved great technological power, but used it unwisely, leading to their destruction, then their story serves as a warning about the dangers of power without wisdom. If they disrupted natural systems and faced catastrophic consequences, their fate offers guidance about the importance of living in harmony with our environment. The persistence of the Atlantis story across cultures and centuries suggests that it carries important information, not just about what happened in the past, but about what could happen in the future if we don't learn from ancient mistakes. The search continues. As you drift toward sleep, carrying with you all the mysteries and possibilities we've explored together, remember that you are part of this ongoing search for truth. Every person who questions established narratives, who looks at ancient mysteries with fresh eyes, who remains open to new possibilities about our past and our potential, contributes to the gradual revelation of humanity's true story. The tools for exploration and discovery continue to multiply. Satellite imagery, underwater archaeology, genetic analysis, artificial intelligence, and countless other technologies give curious individuals unprecedented ability to investigate ancient mysteries. The democratization of information means that significant discoveries no longer depend solely on official academic or government institutions. Whether Atlantis was a single civilization or represents the collective memory of humanity's forgotten golden age, the search for this lost world continues to inspire new research, new questions, and new possibilities for understanding who we really are. The greatest discovery may not be finding the physical ruins of Atlantis, but rediscovering the wisdom, technologies, and spiritual insights that allowed our ancestors to achieve greatness, knowledge that could help us create a more sustainable, harmonious, and truly advanced civilization. As you close your eyes tonight, let your imagination carry you back through the mists of time to an age when humans worked with the forces of nature rather than against them, when technology served wisdom rather than replacing it, and when the achievements of civilization were measured not by the power to destroy, but by the capacity to create beauty, harmony, and lasting prosperity for all life. The story of Atlantis is ultimately the story of human potential, both our capacity for greatness and our responsibility to use that capacity wisely. Whether we find the lost city or not, we can still choose to embody the best qualities that the legend represents: the marriage of knowledge and wisdom, the balance of technology and nature, and the eternal human quest to create something greater than ourselves. Sweet dreams, fellow seekers of truth. The mystery continues, and tomorrow brings new possibilities for discovery.